We recognize that CVUUS gathers on land seized from the Western Abenaki people by European colonizers. We respect the Abenaki spiritual relationship to the land and waters of the Champlain Valley. We are committed to building a peaceful and more just relationship with them and to promoting knowledge about their history and culture. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. Welcome to CVUUS, Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. CVUUS is a church that sustains a liberal religious tradition, aspires to be visible and active on behalf of social justice and environmental responsibility, nurtures and empowers us at all ages on our spiritual journeys, and reaches out to the larger communities of which we are a part. We're glad you have chosen to join us today on this kind of wintry third Sunday in January, right smack dab in the middle of winter. Though it's been a strange winter so far, more like, say, Pennsylvania than Vermont. Rain in January is a drag. I know. February and March are the big snow months, so we still might have a chance to boast of our special hardiness. At any rate, we hope you will find here today something that nourishes your spirit and warms your heart. I'm Carl Lindholm, a member of the worship team, and I'm assisting our minister, Barnaby Feeder, in today's service. This is a good time to turn off your phone if you haven't already. I don't have to worry about that because I forgot mine at home. If you're visiting, please sign the guest book in the foyer so we can send you news of activities and events that enrich our time together. And do stay after the service for snacks and a friendly conversation downstairs in the Ann Ross Fellowship Room. Today's social hour will include the January birthday cake. For those like me who had a birthday this month, we will be saving and delivering a piece for Ann Ross and anyone else we know who wants one but couldn't attend church. It's a red velvet cake with beets and cream cheese and goat cheese frosting. The goat cheese, of course, is from the Blue Ledge Farm. People who know me will say, how appropriate, beets in a birthday cake for you, Carl. If you have a milestone or passage that you would like to share, do fill out a yellow card and place it in the basket during the offering. There are many pathways to connection here at CVUUS, activities and events, in addition to Sunday services that bring us together as a community. They are listed in today's order of service and amplified each week in Wednesday's blast. Let us worship together. The call to worship today is by, do you have a hymnal? Oh yes, the gathering song first. Good, that will give me a chance to get a hymnal. It's number 360 in the gray hymnal. I'm laughing a little bit because before the service today, I was wandering around, had nothing to do, and I said to John Barstow, something's going to go wrong because everything is all set up perfectly. But the call to worship today is by one of my favorite Unitarian Universalist writers and figures, Kathleen McTeague. You'll find 5 or 6 of her in the back of the hymnal of her meditations or so forth. And I remember I first heard Kathleen McTeague speak at one of the sessions at the college when the Dalai Lama was visiting. And I can't tell you what she said, but I remember I felt at the time she was a person of very special insight. So I picked up a book by Kathleen McTeague, which I imagine we'll get into a service at some point along the way. But today's call to worship is by her, and it's number 435 if you want to follow along in your hymnal, but you don't have to. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. There. Now, as Barnaby lights the chalice, symbolizing our faith, please follow along with me as we recite our chalice lighting. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Now, Barnaby will do the time for all ages today.
Well, I'm very, very rusty at this, but Poppy decided to let me have a crack at it today. I want to invite any young people in the audience, if you want, to just sit in the front row for this so you can see what's going to go on a little bit better. This looks like green stuff crumpled all over the front of the room, but actually these are 4 ridges in the Smoky Mountains, and I will explain. So this is the year of the rabbit. The Chinese year of the rabbit starts now, and I have a story from the Cherokee tradition about a rabbit and about a turtle. And we're going to act out this story. I have some special help here from Everett, who is going to serve as my turtle prop expert in this story. So this story starts out in the olden days in the world of the Cherokee, long before modern times, and animals, there were huge animals, and they could all talk to each other. There were councils of animals, and humans weren't really on the scene yet. There weren't a lot of stories yet about the world that the animals had built. And at one of these councils afterwards, Rabbit and Turtle were talking. And now turtles are among the oldest animals on Earth, and of course rabbits are everywhere and figure in many, many stories. The most famous being the race story, where the rabbit and the turtle race, and the rabbit is so fast that he gets ahead and he goes to sleep, and then he gets ahead and he dines, and somehow the turtle just keeps going step by step and wins the race. Well, the Cherokee had a very different version of this story, which I want to share with you. So they were talking, and Rabbit was bragging about how fast he was, and how no one could move more quickly than him or run further than him, and he was so smart he could do anything he wanted. And the turtle, who'd been around a lot longer and was wise, got a little bit fed up. It was in a friendly kind of way. And the turtle said, okay, well, let's race. Now, Rabbit wasn't really a bad guy, so he said, look, we'll race over these 4 ridges in the mountains, and to show you that I want you to have a chance, I'm going to let you start off at the first ridge, and I will run to catch up. And Turtle said, oh, okay. And they arranged for the date, and off they went. And so Turtle went off, and he spoke to a few friends of his. He made some arrangements, and he went, and he decided to just sort of wait at the finish line. And on the day of the race, Rabbit shows up, and he looks off in the distance. He shakes hands with all of his rabbit friends who were there waiting for him at the starting line. And he sees the turtle up at the edge of the first ridge. And he's ready to go, and he gives the signal, flapping his ear, and off the race goes. And so the rabbit goes running as fast as he can while the turtle goes up over the ridge, out of sight, and hides in the grass. Meanwhile, so the rabbit runs and he runs and he runs, and he's moving along at a good pace, and he gets there, and he looks around what he's done. He can't see the turtle down in the valley, and he looks up and he sees the turtle on the top of the following ridge just going over. So the rabbit says, all right, got to keep going, runs as fast as he can, gets to the top of the ridge. He's getting a little winded, but he's a rabbit. He can run for a long time. He gets up there and he sees the turtle at the following ridge. Oh my gosh. So he keeps going fast as he can. And he gets to the top ridge, and he sees up ahead Turtle going over the final ridge and winning the race. And Rabbit's not a quitter. He keeps running, and he gets to the end, and he reads Turtle, and he agrees that he's lost the bet, but he still can't figure out how it happened. And of course, as the Cherokee tell the story, what Turtle had done is he'd gone to 3 other turtles, and had counted on the fact that the rabbit was so impressed with who he was that he didn't even bother to look at how turtles were different from each other. And in the distance, every turtle looked the same to him. And he assumed somehow, in some way that he could never figure out, that the turtle had managed to cover all of that distance. Now, I have a feeling that this story probably started out as a teaching lesson about the importance of community and not relying just on yourself. But the Cherokee, like a lot of Native Americans, actually love to tell stories about animals just for entertainment. And gradually it got embellished over the years, and I'm sure that people were acting out, cheering animals on the sidelines and all kinds of things. And it was a story eventually told more for fun than any other reason. And everyone, thank you. I just want to tell you one more thing about this story. When you just look out here and see if you can pick out someone who you think might be the oldest person in the room. Or, and you don't have to say who it is, but what I want to say to you is when that oldest person was your age and they looked out in a room and saw the oldest person they knew, that person was probably born around the time that a man named James Mooney went and lived among the Cherokee and first heard this story and wrote it down. And he heard it from a very old man. So the story comes out of legends that existed before the American Civil War. Just so you know that it's a very old story. And they have been telling it forever. So with that, I want to invite all of the children to gather here at the front. We will sing them out, and with Mary Hadley and the Children's Chalice. Let's touch the earth, reach the sky.
Touch the earth, Good morning. I'm going to introduce this week's donee, which is the Unitarian Universalist, Refugee and Immigrant Services and Education. I'm only going to say that once, and from now on, I'm going to refer to the organization as URISE. URISE provides low-cost and no-cost immigration legal services to help clients access the protections and benefits available under current immigration law. The organization is a Department of Justice, recognized nonprofit, and has accredited representatives and attorneys on staff. Accredited representatives can represent folks in immigration hearings. Founded in 2007 as an all-volunteer organization, URISE has grown over the years and has now a multidisciplinary staff team that works in collaboration and partnership with other organizations to leverage the skills and resources that it has to serve the most number of clients. URISE's legal staff provides one-to-one counseling and representation that starts with comprehensive assessment of an individual or family's current immigration status and potential immigration relief. The organization also provides no-cost group workshops to assist with naturalization and DACA status and renewals. Among other services that the organization provides are family petitions, work and green card renewals and replacements, and services for victims of domestic violence and other crimes. This list is by no means all-inclusive. On a personal level, I am an immigrant. And in some ways, most of us can trace our heritage back to immigrant families. My family was fortunate. We had relatives that sponsored us, guided us, and supported us in so many other ways. Not all families are that fortunate, and yet they are no less deserving. I hope that you will be as generous as you can in supporting the important work that URISE does. Thank you.
And we have a little extra twist on the offering today because while the offering period normally focuses on money we share, there's something else we're going to ask you to offer today, and it has to do with the little yellow sticky things on the back of your order of service. As a lot of you know, in June 30th, I'll be stepping down as the lead minister, and we will be having an interim minister. The board has appointed a subgroup to help it choose the interim minister, and that subgroup has invited two lay members of the congregation to join them to help them advise the board. And the group decided one of the things it wanted to do was just get a little sense in a very kind of general way of what congregants might be thinking they would most like to see in an interim minister. Now, an interim minister can't do everything that your regular settled minister can do, but they can help in a lot of ways. So with Heidi Soulis, who's a member of the sub-team that's advising the board, they wanted to take this little poll, and they're asking everybody today to just write one, if you feel very wordy, 2 words on your yellow stick-it about what you would most like to see in the interim minister who will come here. And we will collect those during the offering too. Where's Heidi? Oh, can you stand up, Heidi, so people... Heidi will come around and collect as many of you, those as you've filled out. But if you haven't filled it out, she'll be available at the back door to collect them at the end of the service. Just your 1 or 2 word thoughts about what you'd most like to see while you're doing the offering for URISE. Did I leave anything out, Heidi? So Heidi, thank you for clarifying that. That's just a characteristic or an attribute you'd like to see so that you're a little engaged in this process. Unlike choosing your next regular minister, this isn't a process that's going to be resulting in you being asked to vote on a candidate. This is going to be done by a board contract. So everything they can find out about your feelings is coming out just in the general front-end process. When we get around to calling another full-time minister, the congregation will make that decision. As it did with me in 2012. So with that, we'll have some offering music, and the baskets will be passed for You Rise, and you'll have a chance to fill things out. If you need a pen or a pencil, just raise your hand. The ushers have them to bring around for you. So I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we receive the offering with our usual words. From you I receive. So, a busy day for yellow cards, and I'm going to start off with one received this morning from Mary Hadley about her son Peter Orzek. Peter started his Appalachian Trail journey at Katahdin in Maine on August 26th and arrived at Springer Mountain, Georgia yesterday, January 21st. That's a banner time of over 2,200 miles by a young man that turned 22 along the trail. Thanks to everyone who encouraged Peter and supported hearing about his trip at every meeting check-in from Mary. And since Mary does so much at the congregation, a lot of us have been monitoring the trip, and we're really happy that Peter successfully completed it. We also got a card this morning from Dinah, which refers to the Circle of Life that went out. I hope a lot of people saw it. About Margot Borden passing in Montana, where Lori and Richard moved a year ago. Dinah says, with gratitude for the life of Margot Borden, who touched our lives with uncommon wisdom, kindness, and generosity. And as I said when I told you a little while ago she had gone into hospice, I can not look out at this room without seeing Margot sitting there as she did for year after year, sort of right where Seth is sitting at the moment. And there will be a celebration of life here at a date to be announced in the future when the weather is a lot better. And so stay tuned for that. I got a note from Al Boudreau. A lot of you may not know Al because he hasn't been coming during COVID, except once or twice. But Al has a new love in his life, and after some time, they have moved in together in Castleton. So he is withdrawing from participation in our congregation. He asked about the UU Church in Rutland, and we're wishing him all the blessings of this new relationship, and I told him we can still consider him a congregant if he wants, even if he's never here. A lot of us will remember all the many, many things Al shared with us about astronomy during his active years here. And I think, maybe Abby can correct me on this, he was one of the first members of the writing group that we had here. I know he wrote a novel before I arrived, so he'd been active in many aspects of congregational life. Dottie Nelson shared with me that Eric is in Porter Rehab dealing with a leg infection. We're hoping for a speedy recovery from that so Eric can get home. And just this week we learned that Ginny Mosier had a stroke that forced her to spend some time at UVM Medical Center up in Burlington. We're not sure when she'll be discharged from rehab there to finish her rehab here, but she's not in any mortal danger. 2 of her children are up here to spend the time with her. And in typical Ginny fashion, her biggest concern when we reached her was, is Barnaby okay? What's going to happen with the meeting I was organizing for the Eastview residents on Monday? And she just wanted to make sure that that was taken care of. So for those of you who don't know Ginny, that tells you a lot about who she is. Abby said a note saying, today, January 22nd, is the 50th anniversary of the Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade guaranteeing reproductive rights to all Americans. And Abby invites you to join her and others in putting a candle in your window tonight. We can mark the anniversary by honoring generations of advocates who fought for reproductive freedom by recognizing the countless women whose lives and futures have been saved and shaped by the Roe v. Wade decision, and by reminding the world that the fight for reproductive freedom and bodily autonomy continues. Thank you for submitting that, Abby. This congregation doesn't very often submit yellow cards related to events in the news compared to some I've been in. And I'm glad Abby submitted that, because if you really care about something and there's a milestone, it's appropriate to share it with the congregation. It doesn't have to be something in your personal life. Okay, and with that, I'm going to invite you into this time of silence and meditation that we have every week, because we recognize that there are always very important unspoken milestones and concerns, and we want you to have time to connect with them. for the hymn, What is This Life?
We have two short readings. The ancient reading is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, verses 27 and 28. The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. The modern reading is from Walden, chapter 18, the conclusion, Walden by our Unitarian forebear, Henry David Thoreau. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away.
So last Sunday, I ended my sermon pretty much by sharing a critique of our faith that went like this: UUs agree to disagree, and then we never do. And several of you came up to me afterwards and said how true this seemed to you in various ways, sometimes more with how you smiled at me than what you said. You seem to suggest that you'd like to hear me address conflict avoidance and our seeming rush to find common ground. Now, I get it. I think we do take for granted that there are real thought-provoking differences between us on different topics. Topics like the nature of God, the nature of people, the nature of evil, lots of things religions normally discuss. And it's also true that there's real differences between us, at least on the nuances of our politics. I mean, I think it's safe to say the congregation, like Middlebury itself, leans overwhelmingly left, but that doesn't mean there aren't important distinctions within that people feel very strongly about. And we actually do have some more conservative members who don't necessarily want to embark on an open disagreement once they're in the sanctuary. So I have no doubt that if we spent more time spotlighting these differences, and it would get the pulse rates up and it might challenge people's thinking. And if you want a much more exciting Sunday, that might lead to it. Well, I have to confess that I ended on that note last Sunday because I was planning to pick it up again today. And I need to talk to you about exploring our principles and disagreements about that. Now, going into this exercise, I have to admit my worry is that this will strike you as earnest and academic and even pious, in the sense that people might start thinking, oh, principles, schmitziples, let's just go do something that's helpful or not be here at all. First of all, I want to say that just the way the Unitarian used to be an insult in the early 19th century until the radical Puritans claimed it as a name and said, yes, we are Unitarian. We don't believe in the Trinity in the Bible. I think being earnest and academic and pious about some things is something we ought to say, thank you for noticing. These things are important. Pious has this sense of being almost hypocritical, but actually the literal definition is loyal reverence or devotion beyond what others are doing. And maybe that's why you feel outside the norm, and maybe that's why you feel it's something you can't even sustain. But for some things, it's a name worth claiming and saying, yes, thank you for noticing. The problem is that the world in general, and even most of us, and I'm including me here, actually have a very limited appetite for exploring disagreements about core beliefs. When you start to do it in detail, minds wander and bodies fidget. There was a New Yorker cartoon a number of years ago. It was titled, "Another Way to Get More Space for Yourself on the Subway." And it showed a guy sitting there with a t-shirt that said, "Ask me about my religion." I think we disagree a lot, but we don't make a big deal out of it because many of us actually embrace Thoreau's advice to be aware that people march to different drummers and that it's a good thing and that we don't have to make a fight over someone who's marching at a different pace from us. We don't generally see our gatherings, especially Sunday morning worship, as a time for exploring disagreements. I mean, most exploration of disagreements in today's society more likely resembles the presidential debates where everybody's yelling over each other and making no effort at all to see what point the other person is making that you might build on. And I think we instinctively don't want to open ourselves up to that prevailing mode of highlighting disagreements in our society. However, just like running a marathon, there's a crucial mix of attributes, and I think of attentiveness and courage and training and, above all, pacing to really exploring disagreements on big questions effectively. And this is crucial, not just effectively, but exploring them with love for each other. So we know more about that, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk today about pacing as an essential skill for our times. Now, I've already talked this year about depolarization as an essential skill and decentering, learning not to just default to your assumptions about what's the center of the argument. Pacing is a little more subtle than that. When we say pacing, normally it's a shorthand for I'm stopping doing something. I need more room to stop and stare. I've got to pace myself. But for people who are really into pacing, they know it's a lot more complicated. So in preparing this sermon, I called two of our long-distance runners, people who you don't actually see here very often because they're too busy training. Julia Chant is one and Melanie Sands is the other. And we had long talks about what pacing is like in their world. And Melanie laughed at one point. She says, when I'm talking about pacing, I'm usually thinking about whether I need to speed up, not whether I need to slow down in the world where she's running. And there's a lot of other things that when you think about it, pacing gets very, very sophisticated. It's not a way of slowing down. That's not the goal. The goal is to make it possible for you in the end to run further for longer. You're preparing yourself for more progress, not a break from the work you're doing. So that's one important aspect of pacing. Another thing they emphasized is that while in a race you have a very specific goal and it's essentially you against your goal and things like that, there are actually a lot of pacing issues in a race that are more communal than you might realize if you weren't doing a lot of what they do. So for instance, and I didn't know this, in most of the major races, there are people who agree to be pacers. And they will, if someone is trying to average an 8-minute mile or a 7.5-minute mile that puts them nowhere near the leaders, there will be someone who is back there with them, who is trained for that, who is with this group encouraging people, saying, if you stay with me, you'll hit your pace, and has formed this little temporary community of pacing. Those of us who aren't doing these kinds of distances wouldn't necessarily know that. Pacing can be affected by your surroundings in ways that I didn't think about. So I was talking with Melanie and I said, well, you know, when I ran cross country in high school in California and the weather is always good, and I came back to New England and I was on the freshman cross country team, and I found myself running and then slowing down to look at the scenery because it was so damn beautiful. And the surroundings were really making my choice about pacing. It had nothing to do with the goals of the workout. And she laughed and she said, well, scenery does have an impact on your pacing, particularly if you're doing trail running like she does. And not the kind of impact I had of slowing down, but she said it totally changes how you're feeling the suffering. And at some point in your racing, you're feeling pain. If you've got beautiful scenery, or if you're running for a purpose, like raising money for breast cancer, it changes how the suffering affects your ability to pace. So I raise these issues because when I say pacing is an aspect of dealing with our principles, I want you to understand, I'm not saying it's just a matter of we need to be slow in certain places. We need to really think about all of the different things that affect how we want to move through a really important disagreement. And we have some very important disagreements coming up in Unitarian Universalism in general and in our congregation right now. This is the time when we're standing on several thresholds, places where disagreeing openly and lovingly is going to be vital to shaping what happens to this congregation and vital to your individual sense of whether you belong here. So, in a little way, we hinted at that with this exercise of collecting what you want in your interim minister. We slowed down, took a little piece out of the service to collect this feedback from you. That was a pacing exercise to help this be more meaningful down the line. How much we invest financially in our time of transition. Congregational life is never about money, but some of our most important disagreements are about how we explore and resolve together what we're going to do with money. And so there's a lot of pacing that's going to be involved, emotional pacing, mental pacing, in this spring's pledge drive and in the pledge drives you have with your interim minister. And there's the Article 2 revisions. Those of you who've been coming have heard that the UUA is, for the first time in nearly 40 years, rethinking how it deals with all of its basic principles. If you've got a hymnal with you, if you look in the hymnal, right after the table of contents in the preface, you'll see listed, we, the member of the congregation's Unitarian Universalists, covenant to promote, affirm and promote, and it's got 7 principles, and under it, it's got the living tradition from which we draw, comes from many sources, and it lists these sources. And at the end, it ties it all together by saying, grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches and ennobles our faith, we are inspired to deepen our understanding and expand our vision. As free congregations, we enter into this covenant, promising to one another our mutual trust and support. These are big principal words, and they're actually in the UUA bylaws. And people have come to take these principles as their personal values, a lot of UUs, not realizing the preamble says it's only a congregational thing. So that's a voluntary assumption. And so people are really worried about changing these principles. I'm not going to go in again to what's going on there, but that passed an important milestone this weekend when the version that's going to be the template for the first vote at GA in June went to the UUA Board of Directors. And that's going to lead to discussions this spring about the wording and a vote. And if it passes, there'll be another vote in 2024. And at the end, all of this language will be replaced with a different construction that has a lot of these ideas, but in a very different way. And some would say in a different emphasis. And so this is, a once in every other generation event in UU world. This is the kind of thing our disagreements are important to voice in a loving way. So this is the kind of conflict that we enter because we want to do it productively. So that leads, of course, to the disagreement of the moment, or the area for disagreement of the moment, and that's the proposed eighth principle. So anybody who's been here more than 1 or 2 weeks, I hope, is beginning to get a grasp of what we're talking about when we talk about journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. That's the wording of the proposed eighth principle. More than 200 congregations have adopted it for their own purposes, but because of these Article 2 revisions, it may never get to a final vote at the UUA General Assembly. It may be incorporated instead into the revisions of all the other principles. So that leaves open, will congregations continue to adopt it in the meantime for themselves? And we're one of the congregations thinking about that. Now, most of you know that I'm very much in favor of this principle. I haven't made a secret about it for several years. And over the last year, I've been especially in your face about my views about this. But instead of repeating it once again, why I think this is important, I'm going to point you to a couple of ways to learn more about why UUs disagree with me about the eighth principle. Now, you may want to jot down some references in the free thinker space, but I'm going to provide links in next Friday's weekend greetings, so you don't need to be writing down these names and citations. I want to start with the words of Michelle Hurst, an African-American elder and member of the UU Fellowship of the Peninsula in Newport News, Virginia. So this is a black UU in a congregation that's in a very integrated area compared to Vermont, and has both black and white members in its congregation. And she wrote last May, "As a black woman who has dedicated over 50 years of my life to the values of justice and inclusion, I want to support it. I studied it. I listened to others who are voting for it. However, I must stand against it. As currently written, I find this eighth principle is just not right for Unitarian Universalism, the UUFP, her congregation, or me." Here's a taste of her analysis. Unlike, this is her speaking now, unlike the other principles, which are both elegant and eloquent, the eighth seems wordy and awkward. It uses unnecessary verbiage and most regrettably states things that many UUs may not believe. For example, she says, the words journeying towards spiritual wholeness. She writes, addressing spiritual wholeness may not be appropriate because there are many UUs identifying as humanists, agnostics, and atheists. They may not be working towards spiritual anything. So you need to know here that Ms. Hurst is a believer in God. her disagreement comes from a place of love for her fellow congregants and for our spiritual diversity. More important than continuing with her well-thought-out objections, here is the need to tell you that her argument was posted on the congregation's website last May, along with many others, both for and against, as the congregation moved towards a vote on whether to adopt the principle at its meeting last June, annual meeting. Her footnotes included links to other posts, like this one, where she linked to a white lay leader of the congregation who worried, like her, about the part that called for people to be accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions. They felt that this wording inevitably marginalized the other unnamed forms of oppression. Critics speculated that would lead to a need for enlarging the principle still further, or pressure to create still more principles centering on other forms of oppression. Now, this won't surprise you if you came to our discussion a couple weeks ago here, because this point was sort of made by one of the people participating in the discussion. I can't remember here. So I want to say two other things about all the posts on their site. One, they put a lot of work into how to create a post that leads to helpful, loving disagreement. There are I statements. There are thank you to the people who are opponents. There isn't an attempt to demean any opponent. And so I don't know whether they edited things before they went up or people had a worksheet about how to do it. But they exhibited what's in our current fourth and fifth principles, which talk about a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and for the use of democratic processes in reaching decisions in our congregations. Now, another thing they did is that they required a yes vote of 2/3. They felt this was more important than just a resolution that they could pass with a majority vote. And there are other congregations out there who have required a yes vote of 85%, similar to what they might require for calling a new minister. They're saying our decision with what to do with this is just as important as calling a new minister. Reading between the lines in the debate at their website, it looks like the vote fell short of approval. There is actually no announcement on the website that that's what happened. But there is an announcement that the board and leadership responded to whatever that vote was by rolling out an extremely extensive anti-racism program driven by a board resolution that the congregation was committing itself to being anti-racist in all of its activities. So the board was apparently, along with other civil rights leaders in the group, prepared for the work is going to get done whether we adopt the resolution or not, and we'll just go about it a different way. Now, whether some people left the congregation because that vote was no, I don't know. I suspect it has to be true, because whenever there's a vote that people really care about, whether it's calling a new minister or something like this, some people feel that just they're less at home. They don't necessarily leave permanently, but they certainly leave for a while. And this is something, as we proceed, that we should expect and honor. If someone feels so hurt about how our vote goes, if we proceed to a vote, one way or the other, they are to be embraced for doing exactly what we wanted them to do, following their conscience. And if they leave, they're just to know they're welcome to come back. We're ready for them whenever. But if they leave to move on to something else, we wish them well and we'll be supportive in that. There are some things you go into knowing that there will be changes. I know of one historically progressive congregation, Community Church of New York, which is now led by one of my favorite ministers, someone I worked with in ethical eating, and they've decided to put off voting on the principle until there is clear and convincing evidence it is being lived out already in their anti-racism work. So once they've reached a point where they feel they're doing everything the principal would ask them to do, then they're going to vote on it. The bottom line is that exploring disagreements and belief that matter is nothing less than a deep test of how far along we are in building beloved community. If there's a vote, the outcome matters far less than how positively the community responds to embrace not just the outcome, but everyone who feels harmed by it. Going to church is already very countercultural here in Vermont. You've heard me say that. There are a lot of enticements and social pressures to do otherwise, and participating in the life of a congregation at a time when it's openly invested in this kind of work, which I've said we have a limited appetite for, is going to make you look even weirder to your neighbors. Yeah, I'm going to church today, and it's not to talk about what's awesome in nature, it's to talk about our principles. This idea of why can't we forget about this and just do more good work is going to get stronger. So I want to conclude by just telling you something awesome about nature. I know this congregation really likes awesome nature stories. They love the whale windows. You love the whale windows. So I want to tell you, speaking of turtles, about a large turtle that lives in the Amazon River Basin. Some of them are also in the Orinoco River Basin in Venezuela. And when Jesus said the Sabbath was made for humans and not humans for the Sabbath, he was teaching the rabbis that their rules weren't as important as doing things that feed us. Right now, at this time of environmental tragedy, awesome things that enlarge our understanding of our animal kin feed us. So we're following Jesus in saying the Sabbath, this day of gathering, was made for us. When I tell you that these turtles, which are known as aruha, I don't know the Portuguese, A-R-R-U-A, aruja. The females are 2.5 feet long, 2.5 feet long, and up to 200 pounds. The males are a little smaller. The hatchlings are only 2 inches. They spend almost all of their life in water, and for a long time it was assumed, like most aquatic turtles, that they made very few sounds and used sounds for hardly anything. They did know that these animals in the Amazon were a little unusual, and that the females came together in large groups and laid batches of 50 to 150 eggs each in large numbers, and there could be, and all of the eggs tended to hatch on the same day or within a few days of each other, and sometimes there would be millions, literally millions of these turtles all feeding back into the rivers all in a short period of time. Now this is a defense mechanism. Prey animals can get fewer of you if everybody's moving at once. It turns out that the big prey animal at this point is the humans, who gather the eggs long before the hatching, and that's why these are endangered animals. But it also turns out that these animals are communicating with sounds in a way that we really didn't understand, because A, they're in a register that's very hard for us to hear, so we weren't really looking there, and B, they're often spaced out in ways that don't resemble communication at all in the way humans use sounds, and so we didn't even think we were looking at communication when we were. So they have been putting microphones out, not just on the animals, but around the eggs, and they have found that the eggs chirp to each other. And they chirp to each other in a gathering crescendo that comes together, and it's like they are saying, it's time to come out, it's time to come out. And when they reach a certain agreement among all of these eggs, they all come out and head for the river. This is a bit of communication that we didn't understand because we were too caught up in our human way of looking at it. So the result of finally looking at it in a better way is that conservation efforts have been stepped up in a dramatic way in the Amazon. And although they're threatened species, there's hope for establishing closer to a right relationship with them. And so our pacing of our involvement with these animals has changed by being more open to who they really are. An essential skill, being more open to who each other really are, and adjusting how we're going about life accordingly. Blessed be. Okay, I invite everybody to, first of all, thank you for bearing with me as we ran a little over. Thank you, Mari, for video casting, Abby for doing the camera, and she's training Dimitri, who's going to start doing camera sometime in the future, I hope soon. I invite you downstairs. If you see the last piece of cake there, don't take it till we're sure that we've saved one for Ann Ross. Please. Pace yourself. Blessed be and amen.
Giving life.